Idiom or phrase that calls for solidarity with others in problem. There is an idiom in my language that translates to something like, if you don't do anything about the robber when he's robbing your neighbor's house, then next house he will rob is yours. Essentially, standing for others' rights is equivalent to standing for your own. Is there any idiom or phrase in English that conveys this point?
United we stand, divided we fall, so common it has its own Wikipedia entry. Another flavor begins, first they came, attributed to Pastor Martin Niemöller, 1892-1984, from his poem. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Another famous quote on a similar vein from Benjamin Franklin is we must, indeed, all hang together or, most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. There are also expressions like stick together for safety, there's safety in numbers, and others to convey the idea that we are stronger together, actually a current political campaign theme. Another very succinct term for the example provided is neighborhood watch, a program of systematic local vigilance by residents of a neighborhood to discourage crime, especially burglary. It has become a large program in the US, Neighborhood Watch.
I have done some research and here is what I have found. The most popular similar phrase from a meaning point of view, that used to be common in English usage, but is not anymore, is a Latin phrase. Proximus audet ucolegem. It was popular in the English language from about 1643, earliest reference I could find in popular usage, and was still popular in 1849. The notion that if you do not help a neighbor who has a house on fire, yours may well be next was also a popular notion, as these excerpts from early American sources testify. Reference, early American proverbs, and proverbial phrases, here. He that will not help to quench the fire in his neighbor's house, may justly fear to lose his own. Hubbard Indian, 1677. It is an old and wise caution that when our neighbor's house is on fire we ought to take care of our own. Colton Letters, 1737, a prudent man should lend his assistance to extinguish the flames, which had invaded the house of his next-door neighbor, and not coldly wait until the flame had reached his own. Lee Letters, 1768. Yet when neighbors' houses are afire, our own is always in danger. Jefferson Papers, 1791. In fact, the idea became so popular that it is referred to as a common observation in the Lee Letters of 1768, already quoted. The Latin phrase I have mentioned above. Proximus audet ucolegem I've managed to track down to Virgil's Aeneid, and the phrase translates literally to ucolegem burns next. According to Virgil's account, the house of Ucolegem burned down when the city was sacked. The word ucolegem is not in any modern dictionaries, but according to this source is listed in Webster's New International Dictionary, 2nd ed., 1954, as follows. Ucolegem, in Trojan legend, one of the ancient counselors who sat with Priam on the wall. Aeneas speaks of the flames reaching Ucolegem's house, next to that of Anchises, before he fled from the city. Hence, a next-door neighbor, or a neighbor whose house is on fire. The same source I quoted above references an essay by Thomas de Quincey which I've located here, and this attests to what is quoted in the reference above, that Quincey does actually refer to the phrase as rather too trite, indicating it must have been very popular at the time. So this was certainly a very popular phrase in 1849 when this essay was penned. You might note in the Winthrop Papers of 1643, already referenced indirectly above, an extension of the phrase, Proximus audet is used to describe the very idea you have related. Also, if you are looking for a modern-day phrase, here are a couple I have come up with. Preclude your demise, support your neighbor. Help your neighbor or suffer the consequences. To turn your back on your neighbor is to turn your back on good fortune. Woe betide he who fails to help his neighbor. Help your neighbor, help yourself. These are my own inventions so hardly in popular usage, but in the absence of any more popular modern phrases that come close to conveying this meaning, I thought they might give you some ideas.
The following is a quote by JFK from Civil Rights Announcement of 1963 that I find very powerful. I know it's not an idiom or a phrase, but I hope you find it inspiring for what you need. The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Very useful question here. I think this has a very fatalistic connotation to it, but it does suit the general premise. Join, or die. Wikipedia. Join, or Die is a well-known political cartoon, created by Benjamin Franklin and first published in his Pennsylvania Gazette on May 9, 1754. It is a woodcut showing a snake cut into eighths, with each segment labeled with the initials of one of the American colonies or regions. New England was represented as one segment, rather than the 4 colonies it was at that time. Delaware was not listed separately as it was part of Pennsylvania. Georgia, however, was omitted completely. Thus, it has 8 segments of snake rather than the traditional 13 colonies. 3. The 2 northernmost British American colonies at the time, Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, were not represented, nor were any British Caribbean possessions. The cartoon appeared along with Franklin's editorial about the disunited state of the colonies, and helped make his point about the importance of colonial unity. The general idea is that if you don't join together with your community and fellow countrymen, you yourself run the risk of dying separately. Dying here is hyperbolic and metaphorical in nature, i.e. you won't necessarily die if you don't join together, but you will suffer more.
A similar term in English is all for one, and one for all. This is a motto traditionally associated with the titular heroes of the novel The Three Musketeers, written by Alexandre Dumas père, first published in 1844. It has been derived from the Latin phrase unus pro omnibus, omnes pro uno. Wikipedia. The phrase came into widespread use in the 19th century. After autumn storms had caused widespread floods in the Swiss Alps in late September and early October 1868, officials launched an aid campaign under that slogan. This phrase can be used in different contexts, but essentially means that all that stands up for another person right is equivalent to standing up for your own right and that of others.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.